Welcome back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. Before we get started, if you haven't yet, leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a bunch. But man, Ty, we're back. The UFC is back. After what seemed like, weeks and weeks on end with event after event, we had to wait for what seemed like forever, but we've got a banger of a fight here between Max Holloway and Calvin Kattar to kick us back off on Fight Island.
Yeah, so after getting spoiled weekend after weekend with good fight cards, whenever we take a few weeks off, it really does feel like forever.
Yeah.
I think after officially 9 cancellations, we're still getting an 11 or 12 fight card, and so props to the UFC for doing that. We ended the year last year on a positive note. We're looking to keep that momentum moving forward. Last year we said that we were giving away the poster right here, and we did officially pick a winner, Ethan Chapman. I know we've already gotten in contact with him, and hopefully he'll send us a pic so we can post it up here or something. But we're excited to continue the year with more giveaways and stuff, and just keep the momentum going.
Absolutely, man. So without further ado, let's dive into this.
Yeah, so we start off the night in the featherweight division with Jacob Kilburn, who is 8-3, versus Austin Lights Out Lingo, who's 7-1. It's tough to say a bunch of good things about Jacob Kilburn, and it's not something that I enjoy doing, but even though he is a Tennessee boy, you do have to be realistic with the skill sets that he has.
Right.
And the 2 times that he's faced anybody with UFC caliber talent, he's been absolutely dominated from start to finish. And we saw that in the Bobby Moffitt fight and in the Billy Quarantillo fight. Even as an amateur, Jacob Kilburn was 7-3, and that's not something that you want to see with somebody in the UFC. You would think that at least on the regional scene, they're dominating everybody. Right. The upside to Jacob Kilburn right now is that he's only 25 years old, so there is still a lot of room for improvement as far as experience and just getting that under his belt. I think that right now he's still making those amateurish mistakes, but he also lacks maybe this is similar to Chase Hooper, that man strength.
Right.
I mean, even in that Billy Quarantillo fight, we saw him kind of get manhandled by a guy who's not notoriously strong in Billy Q. And then moving over to Austin Lingo, as far as his record, being only 7-1, at least 6 of those fights were at LFA, so in a organization that we're both pretty fond of.
Right.
And he went 6-0. So I know he's seen the better competition. And, of course, he pulls Youssef Zalal for his UFC debut. It's a tough opponent for anybody. And Youssef's kind of established himself as one of the higher-end prospects of the 145 division. That was Austin Lingo's first time out of the first round, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And he looked all right.
He didn't look too bad.
No, for somebody who had never seen the second round, I thought that considering the guy he was fighting and the fight style that Austin Lingo has, I thought that he showed good cardio. He did kind of show that he was a little heavy on his lead leg.
Absolutely.
So he does kind of have some problems or some holes in his game of his own, but he's only 26 himself. The odds are a little wide for my liking, but I do think that Austin Lingo is leaps and bounds better than Jacob Kilburn, and there's some more spots on this that I think that we're looking at rather than just playing a money line.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We do agree. The only thing Jacob Kilburn's got going for him is that he's a Tennessee boy for us. We do have to be realistic, and he's not UFC competition or UFC level, in my opinion. This is more the one-sided fights of the night. I do think Austin Lingo is a rightful -225 favorite here. With Jacob Kilburn, man, the resume outside the UFC, it's pretty weak. This guy is kind of basic on the feet with a big overhand right. And when it comes to his takedown defense, wrestling, submission defense, it's basically non-existent. This guy does get manhandled on the mat, and all 3 of his losses are by sub. With Lingo, training out of Fortis MMA with great grapplers, that brawling style, I think he has advantage on the feet, on the mat, just about wherever this fight wants to go. When he smells blood, man, this guy really does put a pace and pressure on you and backs you up. I want to take a stab on the Lingo sub at +500 just because Kilburn's lost all 3 of his fights by submission. But at +170, Austin Lingo inside the distance, that is way too hard to pass up. This guy can get it done just about any way he wants. Outside of brawling a little too much and being heavy on that lead leg, that's about the only real things I can knock on this guy. I do see the things that I like, and at 26, I expect improvements and great size for a featherweight. And I also know that, if Kilburn can get it done, it's got to be some shot that puts Austin away after he makes a mistake. So the under 2.5 at even money is also an absolute steal.
Yeah, it's hard to pass up with two, inexperienced guys. They still have holes that they can exploit in each other's game. So the under 2.5, like you said, even or plus money, it's hard to pass up.
It is, man. Moving on to the most exciting fight of the night, we have Sarah Moras, who is 6-6, taking on Vanessa Miss Simpatia, who is 10-8. This take place in the women's bantamweight division, and open at a -190, sitting at a -230. That's criminal, man. Sarah Moras is not that much better than any girl in the UFC. She has lost 4 of her last 5 fights. The one she did win, she missed weight by 3 pounds, and the strength advantage was obvious in that fight against Jojua. She's been in there with the much better girls, like we'll touch on. She's fought some good names, really young into her career, and 3 fights on the Ultimate Fighter and 8 UFC bouts already. This girl, she trains out of Extreme Couture. She's a real grindy kind of fighter. She likes to put you up against the fence, pump out her jab in order to put your back up on the fence. But her hands don't impress me very much, man. She stands super tall. I think a big overhand right really could cause her some trouble. She's active off her back. She likes her armbar from guard, and she keeps a super high guard, which is weird. When she gets taken down, it's almost like rubber guard to an extent, man. She brings her legs way up, almost in trying to look for a triangle all the time and stuff. But on the other side is Vanessa Melo, who is 0-3 in the UFC herself, has missed weight, I do believe, in every one of those fights so far. This fight's going to be super sloppy. She's extremely heavy on her lead leg and walks into a lot of jabs herself. She is a BJJ brown belt, and I really do think, she could lay on top of Moras and at least get her down. This fight's going to be boring regardless, man, but I know we see it as kind of a coin flip, man, Definitely not at the odds it's at, and I think we're looking at putting a half unit or so on Melo.
Yeah, and, we've talked about this. It's not that we're banking on Melo's fighting ability.
Right.
We're banking that Sarah Moras is a coin flip fighter, and it shows at 6-6. Now, that record is a little bit misleading. We talked about how she's been facing upper echelon competition since her second fight, which was against Juliana Pena, who was 4-0 at the time. Then her next fight was Raquel Pennington. Both of them ranked in the UFC right now, so it's kind of hard to complain about her kind of crappy record at this point in time. Something about Sarah Moras is her toughness. I think that it showed in the Eubanks fight where she can eat some really heavy shots, and even though she is kind of slow and unathletic, a little flat-footed, she does make up for it with that grit, especially in the women's division. That's something that can be a nice tool to have in your arsenal. On the Vanessa Melo side, just body-wise, she's built like a Samoan. Yeah. She's got that thick waist, the thick thighs. I don't know if you touched on this, but in her 3 UFC fights, I think she's missed weight all 3 times. She's definitely not going to be undersized in there by any means. I know that she's the shorter fighter by 2 inches, but I don't think that that's going to be apparent in the octagon. Vanessa Melo doesn't excite me anywhere. I don't think that she's exceptional anywhere. Over 80% of her victories are by decision. She's kind of a boring fighter, and then I know you jokingly said that this is a great fight, but it's hard to get pumped up about this one. That's just plain and simple. I think that if the Melo line continues to increase, it's going to be hard to not play, and that's just basing it off of like betting principles. How if we're going to see it, if we think that we see a coin flip and we can get 2-1 odds, it's hard not to take a stab.
I'm completely with you, man. So expect a small play on Vanessa Melo come Saturday.
Moving on, we go to the welterweight division with David Zawada, who is 17-5, versus Ramazan Emeev, who is 19-4. David Zawada hasn't had the greatest UFC stint so far. He's 1-2. He is coming off of a great victory over Abubakar Nurmagomedov. I know it's one of Khabib's boy. I don't really know how he's affiliated with Khabib.
Right, they're all cousins.
Yeah. So, it definitely pulled off the upset there. But in the other two fights that I've seen, really not impressed, man. In the Danny Roberts fight, you've got an Englishman in Danny Roberts who is going to out-wrestle you. Yeah. I mean, Zawada accepted the position on his back multiple times in that fight against a striker. And it really, threw up some red flags for me as far as, moving forward with him in the UFC. And then he fights Li Jingliang and gets side-kicked, gets finished relatively easy. And then the Nurmagomedov fight, he gets taken down. It looks like it's going to go exactly how the Roberts fight went, or any other wrestler that I feel like Zawada will face. Mm-hmm. But he pulls off the crazy upset with the triangle, and it wasn't a show of who's the better fighter at that night, if you ask me. Ramazan Emeev, former middleweight M1 global champion, so he is used to fighting up a weight class. Mm-hmm. I think even though he is undersized by 2 inches here, I think that he'll physically be the bigger presence in the octagon. He has a combat sambo background. He's a world champion, and he's been wrestling since he was a young kid. I really do think that this is kind of the kryptonite to David Zawada, and it will continue to be as long as he's in the UFC. You have a Russian with legit wrestling. I know that Zawada pulled off the upset, but I really do think that was one of those 1 in a million type things. We talked about that was Nurmagomedov's debut, so maybe some jitters. So I really do think with Emeev's skill set, it's a perfect matchup for him, and one that I think that he should get done relatively easy. My only knock on Emeev is that he does kind of have problems we saw in the Rocco Martin fight with leg kicks. It's something that if he doesn't address that, he'll have problems with it in the future whenever he faces that upper echelon competition.
Yeah, man. So I'm right there with you. I think Emeev takes this one pretty handily here. Zawada is coming off his year layoff, so come off an upset like that at a plus 260 dog, taking no damage. You like to see a guy hop right back in there, but man, back on a year layoff, and then you got another guy who, just like Danny Roberts and Nurmagomedov, are going to look to take your skills and your striking away and put you on the mat. The Zawada has not seen the judges near as many times as Emeev. Emeev has basically become a decision machine in the UFC, has yet to find his first UFC finish. That being said, man, outside of that Rocco Martin fight, most fights are pretty one-sided his way. He pretty much can do what he wants with these guys. You talked about the calf kick, man, because it is one of his biggest weaknesses. He is heavy on that lead leg, like most wrestlers are themselves, though. Patches up some of that, improves the striking a little bit, and I think Emeev's a solid welterweight contender here. He's got a great gas tank, and Zawada getting put away with the body kick in the third round, and slowing down. His cardio is not something I think is going to be able to keep up with Emeev. Mm-hmm. He kind of rushes in, head down, just kind of blindly throws some strikes and some unorthodox strikes. And for a great wrestler, man, I think that's just going to play into his ability to kind of get taken down super easily. He does offer good feints, at you in great size for 170, but he does have a bad tendency to jump the guillotine, and Ramazan will gladly let you jump it just to end up on the mat with you. And I think Emeev is a very nice parlay piece come Saturday.
I couldn't agree more.
Man, moving on to one of our favorite fights of the night, I think. Moving on to the big boys. We have Justin Badman Tafa and Carlos Boy Felipe. Justin Tafa, one of the New Zealanders, man, fights like Mark Hunt, like Tuivasa. This guy it will never try to take you down to the mat. He is going to stand and bang the whole time. But still, super inexperienced at only 5-1. I think he entered the UFC at like 3-0 or something like that. And he got fed to a guy in Jorgen De Castro who had been striking, doing Muay Thai for well over 15 years. And he made one mistake and he paid for it in the first round. He bounced back and at a plus 200 dog, man, he put Juan Adams away with one of my favorite, combos feints that he had Juan Adams' hands literally swiping at the straight left before he came over the top with that hook. It was beautiful. He's taken a little bit of a layoff himself. We've seen Carlos Felipe fight twice now since we've seen Tafa fight, and he's actually got a win over Jorgen De Castro, who has beaten Tafa. So MMA math doesn't make sense a whole lot of times, but I do think it does here. I think Felipe, even the loss in his debut to Sergey Spivak showed me a lot, man. This guy's tough. He will walk you down. He's got a ton of forward pressure, and he's got a tough chin. And he'll talk some shit and discourage you in there himself. He's got, his boxing ability. When he puts you against the fence, when he clinches up, he'll really work the body of some of these other heavyweights and drain that gas tank. And he'll start taking over come late round 2, round 3. I think Felipe is just the better fighter. He's got double the fights at this point. I would like to play the money line for him, but I definitely want it to creep down more in our favor.
Yeah, so this fight opened at pick'em odds, more basically. Or less. And so it's tough to want to play Felipe whenever the line's moved how it has. Right. Above 160, it's tough for me, even though I feel like I have a read on this fight in Felipe's favor, to play that line. He might be... Right. And even with that line, he might be our parlay piece with Emeev, right. Tafa, he's a southpaw, but I think that he's a right-handed southpaw. Yeah. We saw it in the combination you talked about with Juan Adams, the hook to I think it was an uppercut, all with his right hand. But he's also only 4-1 and really inexperienced. And you saw that in the Yorgan de Castro fight, where he had Yorgan backed up against the cage. And to deliver his power shot, it was the only moment in the fight that he switched to an orthodox stance to try and throw a big overhand right. And then just got beat to the punch by Yorgan de Castro. And it really just showed his inexperience. If you have somebody in a position that you want, stick with what's working, To kind of harp on that even more, Justin Tafa's entire MMA career combined time is just under 4 rounds of MMA experience. I mean, really, how much can you know in that time frame? And then, on top of that, I know he doesn't have a ground game. We haven't really seen it exploited yet, but I can guarantee you, as long as I've been watching MMA, I know that Samoans, they just don't have the ground game. Where Carlos Felipe, I think the biggest advantage that he has over Tafa is the speed advantage. I think he has one of the quicker hands in the division, and for the frame, you really wouldn't expect those punches to come out as quickly as they do. I think that it's lucky for both of them that they're facing an opponent that's only going to want to stand, because as much as I've kind of crapped on Tafa's ground game, I guarantee you Carlos Felipe's isn't much better. Right. At the end of the day, I think that this is closer to a pick'em, but with Felipe's speed advantage, I think that gives him enough of an edge for me to, 1, lean towards him, and 2, possibly play him if we can get him at the right price. Yeah, man, I'm with you. I think Felipe takes that one. Cool. So moving on, we've got Wu Yanan, who is 11-3, versus Joselyne Edwards, who's 9-2, and this takes place in the women's flyweight division. So both these girls young, Wu Yanan is 24 and Edwards is 25. Wu Yanan, she's coming off of a 1.5-year layoff, and to be honest with you, I don't mind that at all. She didn't start off her UFC career the best way. She's 1-2 right now in the UFC, with her 2 losses coming to Gina Mazzani and Mizuki Ino. And the Gina loss, man, if she hadn't have been, I think she was like 21 or 22 at the time, that would look like a terrible loss on your record. But because of her inexperience, I kind of give her a pass there. Then on Joselyne Edwards' side, she hasn't faced that upper echelon competition. And the one time that she did, it was in LFA to Sarah Alpar. And although it was a close fight, she wasn't up to snuff. We just saw Sarah Alpar get absolutely annihilated by Jessica Rose Clark. So we kind of understand where Sarah Alpar fits into the equation of the UFC. And if Joselyne Edwards can't get past that, I don't expect her to have an excellent career, even though she is so young. Considering Joselyne Edwards' style, I think that she has more of a brawling technique to her fight style, but she does have great vision when she's striking. She doesn't take her eyes off the target, and she's able to deliver some really hard shots. I think we talked about it a little bit. I kind of compared the way she throws her punches to the way that Amanda Nunes throws her punches. I mean, she throws them hard, especially for a girl. I think Wu Yanan is the more technical striker. She looks to establish that jab early and then circle off the cage when fighters pressure her by throwing a left hook and just circling out. And I think that that's something that we could see with this fight. Wu by decision is how I would call it, although I think that her striking is good enough that she could exploit some holes in Joselyne Edwards' stand-up. Which makes the Wu TKO at plus 900 something tempting for me.
It does, man. So with one on you there, a little bit of a Chinese wave and female fighters that came through with Yanan and the champ and Zhang Wei Li there. Both, far better and more impressive than what we've seen from Yanan Wu. But at the same time, man, at 24 years old, I really do think that the sky's the limit for this girl. She's got great girls to train with, and she's got a ton of time to do that. She's supposed to be fighting Betch Correa here, and that opened at Pick'em odds, and we were all over that. When she got the newcomer in Joselyne Edwards, I thought it was a lost cause of getting odds like that, and at opening at a minus 240, man, I was exactly right. I was never going to lay that kind of chalk on a girl's fighter, but man, the public has just came in and absolutely steamrolled Joselyne Edwards to the fact that we're getting Yanan Wu at a minus 110 and maybe come fight night at dog odds.
Right.
I know that is a play that we're definitely going to play. I think the records, 11-3, 9-2 don't really do it justice. We've seen Yanan Wu have 3 UFC fights where Joselyne Edwards is making a short notice fight in the UFC, bright lights, flying over to Abu Dhabi. Man, it's a lot for your very first UFC debut. We've also, you touched on Yanan Wu's left hook, man, because it's something dangerous. That's definitely her main weapon, man. She likes to lead with it. She'll Conor McGregor you like it. She'll let you come in the dead space and crack you with it. She's got some sneaky submissions off her back, and she's got good footwork and great volume. I think it's enough to beat Joselyne Edwards here, because Joselyne Edwards is one of the more one-dimensional fighters that I've seen. I don't want to say her ground game is non-existent, man, but this girl is very easy to take down, to hold down, to bully against the fence. But on the feet, she has something to deal with. This girl fights long like Amanda Nunes, and that right hand covers a ton of distance. And, I just think Wu, with the UFC experience, I think she's the bit more technical girl. I wouldn't be surprised if she came out here and put the newcomer away inside the distance, by no means. But I know at 110, at Pick'em odds and maybe even dog odds, that's a money line play for us all day.
And something else that I want people to know is, let's say you are watching tape on Joselyne Edwards and you see something that, excites you or makes you think that she's the right play. We're talking about her last fight being against a girl who's 3-4. Yeah. I don't think that it's a great way to pick your fighter if she's fighting competition that wouldn't even come close to the UFC caliber. And for somebody like Wu Yanan, who's already had 3 fights in the UFC as young as she is, I think Joselyne Edwards, under the bright lights, is not going to deliver. I think we see a shelled up version of Joselyne Edwards. I don't even think that she lives up to the potential that she has in this fight.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. That debut, flying all the way to Fight Island
at 25 years old,
it is a lot to take on for sure.
I think we're really looking to play make some major plays on Wu Yanan.
Absolutely, man. And moving on to our prelim main event of the evening, we have the Russian sniper Nassourdine Imavov, who is 9-2, taking on Phil Megatron Hawes, who's also 9-2. And opening up, man, Phil Hawes opened up at a minus 180 to the plus 160 there of Imavov, and kind of rightfully so in my opinion. I think Phil Hawes is the better fighter here, and I'm so glad this the public has went and stormed Imavov, because I think now Phil Hawes is in playable range for us. I looked, I watched tape on that last fight with Jordan Williams, and yes, Imavov cracked him with some shots that would put a lot of people away, but the fight was dirty and grindy, and he took his fair share of shots and stuff as well. And man, Phil Hawes is not the guy. Is not Jordan Williams. I promise you that. He hits 5 times as hard as Jordan Williams does. Nassourdine's resume, it's not the best, man. This guy does like to get the fight on the mat, to use his ground and pound, some of his chokes. He trains out of the MMA lab there in France, but size for size, I think this guy does match up well. He's going to be a little bit bigger than Hawes, but man, when it comes to athleticism and everything, I got to lean toward Phil Hawes all day. he's made the move from Jackson Wink to like Hard Knocks 365 and been training some other places as well. And I know I talked about, a guy built like Phil Hawes. Jackson Wink is not the place for you. You're not long and lanky like Condit, like Holly Holm, like John Jones. The point fighting style is not for Phil Hawes, He took some time off after the knockout loss on Contender Series, and to me, man, we've seen an improved Phil Hawes. I really do think this guy has one of the more solid backgrounds as far as wrestling, collegiate wrestling, athleticism, one of the better foundations that you can build on for a fighter. And I know it's creeping down to about the minus 135 range. And, the only knock on this guy is his gas tank. But I like Phil Hawes, man. And I wouldn't mind playing him straight or even taking a stab on that first round or TKO or something, because those are the only two ways he probably gets it done.
Yeah, so, you touched on just about everything. Phil Hawes, getting him at these type of odds against somebody who is only 9-2 themselves and Nassourdine, I think that it's good value, You touched on his JUCO National Wrestling Championship. It's something that he can always rely on. Yeah. If the fight gets dirty or whatever, he can always fall back on that. Although I don't think that he enjoys using it, because that's when we start to see his cardio problems.
With all the muscle.
Right. Yep. So I feel like he'd much rather keep this fight standing as long as he can. And if he does start getting touched up, that's when he'll resort back to his wrestling foundation. The Julian Marquez head kick knockout on the Contender Series took that, I think it was 2 years off, and has really reinvented himself. This 5-fight win streak have all been finishes, and they've all been, good ones too. I don't know how much better of a UFC debut you could have than an 18-second knockout. Right. So big ups to Phil Hawes there. I think that we laid off that fight because we thought that he was a little green to be betting on, but that was one that I wish we would have jumped on.
That's one we were kicking ourselves for sure.
Exactly. Nassourdine, I think that he also has he also enjoys relying on some wrestling to get the fight where he needs it to be. I don't think he's going to be able to implement that at all. In his stand-up game, I kind of compared his stance to Wonder Boy, where he's almost in and out, jumping on his toes. And to me was impressive. I think at 6'3" and at the 185-pound class, it's a good fighting style to have for his length. I don't think that he pulls it off quite as well as Wonder Boy. Right. So I am fading him here. I think Phil Hawes at this line, like you said, it's too good to pass up. And as long as it continues to move in Hawes' direction, we might sit on it until weigh-ins or something, and until we see it start to go up. This is something that we'll just sit on and get as good as we can, get the line as good as we can before playing it.
Absolutely, man. I like Phil Hawes to get it done inside the distance on Saturday.
So to start off our main card, we have Punahele Soriano, who's 7-0, versus Dusko Todorovic. There we go. Who's 10-0. Somebody's always got to go, and that's what makes this fight exciting. Punahele Soriano, he's finished 6 of his 7 wins in the first round, and that's not something that you like seeing. A lot of the times, it's just something that you can't bank on whenever you're betting for somebody who's barely seen outside of the first round. Thankfully, we did get to see a fight on the Contender Series with Jamie Pickett where he went the full 3 rounds and actually looked really good.
Relied on his wrestling too.
Yeah, he showed some fight IQ at the end of the second round. At the beginning of the third round, he did what he had to do to win against somebody like Jamie Pickett, who is the much bigger guy in that scenario. Soriano, he's kind of undersized for the weight class. At 185 pounds, when you're under 6 foot, it's a liability, in my opinion. And at only 72.5-inch reach, Conor McGregor's got 1.5 inches on you. Yeah. It's tough to work with those physical attributes and be something big at 185. I think that I draw a lot of comparisons, and it might be just because they're both Hawaiians, but to Maki Pitolo. They're built nearly the same. They kind of have a similar style. And that's somebody who I really like to draw parallels to. Onto the Dusko side, he is also undefeated, and he also has 6 first-round finishes himself. I think that he is the more technically sound fighter, both offensively and defensively. Dusko kind of has the same fight style as Ramazan Emeev, where he will make the fight dirty. He'll push you up against the cage and kind of suck the energy out of you, just so he can implement his game plan. You know, I think Dusko in the striking realm, he is a little bit lazy with how he kills time when he's not on the attack. He'll throw out some lazy front kicks just to kind of gauge the distance, and when he exits the clinch, he'll leave his chin up in the air, and that's something that I think eventually it'll really cost him. In this fight, I'm not sure. You know, I'm not sure if Soriano at 7-0 is going to be able to expose those holes in his game, but I do think that it's lying just about right. I think that Dusko is the slight favorite, so I can't argue with it, and I think officially I'll pick Dusko, but I can't say that I wasn't a little worried whenever I saw the Teddy Ash fight on the Contender Series. Ash had some moments where he looked good, and I was a little bit worried for Dusko. I guess it is nice to see Dusko kind of do what he had to do and use the experience that he has gathered in his 10-0 record to win the fight, so I can't knock him there. And then he goes out with Daquan Townsend and does what everybody does to Daquan Townsend, takes him down and wins the fight relatively easy. I think I've said what I need to. Dusko's my pick here. It's close, and I don't even know if I want to pay the -150 for Dusko.
Yeah, man. So for me, this is the most difficult fight on the card to call. It truly is for me. I do think Dusko is, like we said, the slight favorite, but this is the fight that I sit back and just enjoy. No money in on it for me, man. I think this is going to be one of the most fun, exciting fights on the entire card. I'm so glad the UFC is opening the main card with this. It is on ABC, old-fashioned antenna. You'll be able to watch these fights come Saturday. But, man, you know, both these guys, it's weird because they got a UFC contract off of not getting a finish. So the UFC sees high hopes in these guys, and it was evident in who they matched them up with in their first fights. You had Dusko try to get matched up with John Phillips like 2 or 3 times, and then who can't defend a takedown even worse than John Phillips? Daquan Townsend. I mean, come on. And Punahele Soriano, what guy is on like a 3-fight losing streak just waiting to get the pink slip? Peyoda, man. It was perfect. Just matchmaking on the UFC's part for these guys. You know, like Phil Hawes, man, Punahele, he's got a great base for some of them young raw fighters, man. He's got the collegiate background wrestling, trains out of a great gym in Extreme Couture. I know he's getting good looks there, and he's a dangerous southpaw, man, with huge power. That, you know, with that style does come burning a lot of energy, and those grappling exchanges and throwing that big power does take a lot out of him, man. When he stood up from that grappling exchange in the first round with Peyoda, he took a deep breath, man. It was noticeable, and he knew he had to go for the finish. And I truly think, you know, the cardio is definitely on the side of Dusko here. We've also seen Punahele, you know, all 7 fights in 2 years, and I guess he's banging in the gym too, man, because he talks about his injuries and his concussions being one of the reasons for this layoff here, and concussions are not something you want to see for a guy who fights the way Soriano fights, you know? And moving on to the side of Dusko, man, he's a much more composed, technical of the two, in my opinion. But, man, if he doesn't get that head off center, he's going to get cracked, because the Contender Series fight, I'm not going to lie, it worried me a little bit as well, man. Teddy Ash had his moments, and Dusko, you know, a couple times just had to be like, you know, shit, I was having success on the fence. I got to put the fight right back here where it was, you know. He's got great cardio and great dirty boxing, man. This guy really does put you up against the fence and grind on you, and I do think that's how he's going to have to get this done. Man, I went into this wanting to bet Dusko. I thought he was a better fighter, and when I came out, I was not playing this because it's such a fun fight for me. It's a difficult one to call. I think I could kick myself for not betting Dusko there, but yeah, man, I think that's who I'm going to lean though with officially.
So something that I guess we like as a podcast is when we agree on every single fight, and we don't have a fight where we disagree, so we can't do the picks, but With this one, I am going to take Soriano officially, I guess, just to make this our disagreeing fight of the night.
Absolutely, but I do have to pay up from the old one. So, the flying triangle from Jimmy Flick.
Yes,
take
sir.
it.
Yes, sir.
You deserve it, man. That was an awesome finish. I know we've seen the stuff about Cody Durden and tearing his ACL and stuff, but flying triangle is a flying triangle, man.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
You deserve that 20. So I think we agree here. Dusko does take this one on Saturday. Man, moving on to another killer fight, in my opinion. You've got Joaquin Buckley taking on Alessio de Chirico. Man, Buckley, I think the UFC thought they had themselves a loudmouth young boy that they were just going to feed to the wolves and shut him up real quick, man. Giving you Kevin Holland and Impa. At one time, before that knockout, Impa was on a roll in 2020, and Kevin Holland was Fighter of the Year for 20. Both these guys were turning around fighting every week, it seemed like. And to feed Buckley to both of them, Buckley got KO'd by Kevin Holland, but I didn't walk away from that fight unimpressed with Buckley. I didn't. By no means.
Impressed with Kevin Holland and his ability to withstand the fire that Buckley was bringing.
Man. There's not going to be fighters that are going to be able to stand in the pocket and Wing Chun that shit almost,
right.
He fights at Murcielago. There with like Chaos Williams and stuff. I know he spent a lot of time in Missouri from the looks of his Instagram. Man, this guy's a workhorse. And, from the pay-per-view and Embedded, when his coach was talking about, like, you don't have to force a diet upon this guy year-round. It is, the healthiest of eating, being in the gym 24/7. And, I mean, when you look at this guy, it's fucking evident, man. The size and stuff he has, like, it's evident from the time he spends in the gym. I would like to see this guy cut down to welterweight. He's pretty undersized for middleweight from all the muscle he carries. This guy throws heat like only one other person we know of in history, man. But he does get a little wild on the feet, that being said. So that's where we saw Kevin Holland, more technical, straight punches down the middle, take its toll. On the other side, man, we have Alessio de Chirico, who's only had one fight in 2020. He's not been near as active as Buckley. And Buckley's not a guy you want to come in there with some ring rust in, especially that first round. De Chirico is willing to get in there and get in some of those exchanges too, man. And his chin's held up for him so far. I don't think he's ever been finished. But he does have a bad habit of backing himself up against that fence and stuff like Jordan Wright, I think it was, did. And man, Buckley's got a pretty decent reach there for only being 5'10". And if you get backed up, man, that reach will shock you when one of those left hooks land on you. He's riding the 3-fight losing streak right now, man. He's pretty one-side dominant. He likes his left kick, his left hook, his left straight. But I mean, I think the UFC knew what they were doing in this matchmaking, man. I think Alessio's on his way out, and Buckley is one of the top 5 breakout fighters of the year, man,
Yeah, to go from Kevin Holland and Impa Kasaganai to Jordan Wright and Alessio de Chirico, you tell me that he's not in the UFC's favor now.
Right.
I mean, you make him money with that type of highlight reel knockout. Yeah. Dana White said it himself. It's the most viewed clip the UFC's ever put out in their history.
I think he got a $100,000 bonus instead of $50 or something.
I wouldn't doubt it behind the scenes. Yeah, he got a fat paycheck. So, yeah, now they give him a guy who's on the L3. I personally don't think that it's the best opponent to showcase Buckley's knockout abilities. Yeah. You talked about de Chirico only having, in his entire career, he's only been finished once, and that was by submission. I mean, we've seen him eat some hard shots. Yeah. And kind of like lull fighters to sleep, lull me to sleep. Yeah. His fight style, it's not fun to watch tape study on him by any means. They have similar records with 12 wins, but I really question Alessio's. His first 6 opponents combined record is 5-2, and I really question whether they even count because the 5-2 record was put up by one fighter out of those 6. Yeah. Like, how can you and that's outside of amateur. Like, he fought amateur fighters with records and then fought 5 pro fights in his first 6 that have never fought before. And so it's almost like a boxing padded record. And I think that we've kind of seen that in his ability to win fights in the UFC. Even though it's not like he's getting dominated by any means, he hasn't shown up, There is one fight of Alessio's that I kind of can draw some parallels to Joaquin Buckley's style of fighting, and that's the Oluwale Bambouche fight. You know, it's another physically dominant, shorter, athletic fighter, and Alessio was able to time a knee anytime that Bambouche rushed in. He was able to clinch up and time a knee, and I saw it at the beginning of the fight where he just barely missed Bambouche, and then I wrote it down, and then come to find out I just didn't remember it, but he ends up knocking him out with that, and it was apparent that Alessio made an adjustment mid-fight and was able to implement his game plan on a much smaller opponent. Joaquin Buckley, southpaw version of Mike Tyson. Yeah. I mean, to go from Alessio's tape study to Joaquin Buckley, it is night and day. Mm-hmm. It is not. It is entertaining every single second when Buckley fights, just because he throws with just terrible, mean intentions. You talked about him being kind of undersized for the weight class. Yeah, 5'10". He weighed in 3 pounds under the weight limit last time, and that really doesn't sit well with me. That's like whenever DC fought Silva, and Silva came in at like 203 pounds. Yeah. You're giving up weight that is an advantage, whether you like it or not. They have weight classes for a reason, and to give up any of that, I think, is a poor choice in my opinion. I know that right after his win over Jordan Wright, he went and did some training with Tyron Woodley. And I think that that's somebody that could really help him. Mm-hmm. I think that it's somebody who kind of has a very similar body style to Buckley. And if Woodley has found a way to make it to the top with his skill set, I think that Buckley could really learn a lot from him. One other thing, Buckley, although I can I'm happy with his ability to commit to his combinations, he does kind of have a problem with blitzing his opponents. Yeah. And that's something that I've seen Alessio, counter relatively well in his fights. He's able to sit once he gets pushed back up against the cage and throw one of the heaviest overhand rights that I've seen. And I haven't seen it really land yet, but I think if he gets the timing of Buckley blitzing in, I could see an overhand right ending Buckley's night and it not going the way UFC wanted to at all. Like I said, I don't think that this was the best matchup that they could have made for Buckley, although I do think it makes for an exciting one. At the minus 260-ish price tag, it's hard to play Buckley. I do think that he's a little overhyped because of his knockout, and so there will be a day where we fade Buckley.
Absolutely, man. I do know Buckley by TKO was like plus 110, though, so that's the way he's getting this done.
Right.
At plus money for what he's done in his last two, man. Maybe a 0.5.
Yeah, we might have to do something.
Absolutely, man.
So moving on, we go to the welterweight division in the return of Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Jingliang, the Leech, who is 17-6. So Santiago Ponzinibbio, he came to us off the Ultimate Fighter Brazil in 2013 and has now had 11 fights in the UFC. It's been over 2 years since we've seen him, and we've both talked about how we don't mind fighters taking time off to reinvent themselves or work on some of their problems, but that's if you're under 30 years old. We're now talking about a guy who's 34 years old.
And this was not a layoff to sharpen your skills.
No, this was a layoff because he had to. Yeah. And, he's kind of notorious for being injury prone. I know in over 4 of his fights within the UFC, he's had to pull out because of different injuries. Yeah. And it's hard to bank on somebody like that, even though Ponzinibbio has shown us that he is an upper echelon fighter. With his performance against Neil Magny his last time out in 2018, it was a
beatdown.
He showcased his skills. Flawless. And it looked as good as anybody could want in the UFC. He his last loss, he hasn't even tasted defeat since 2015. I can't imagine if he comes back like he did in 2018, this being a difficult fight for him.
Right.
I don't mean to take anything away from Lee. I know that he was originally set to fight Dwight Grant in December, and I think that would have been a much better fight for him. But here he is now, the 14-fight UFC veteran himself, but just hasn't shown up in the big fights.
Very inconsistent.
Yeah, then both of their last opponents is Neil Magny, and it kind of shows you where they are, and I think it's a pretty good test. I would rank Ponzinibbio just above Neil Magny, and I would rate the Leech right under Neil Magny, and it showed with Lee losing by unanimous decision. I don't have much to say about Jingliang. I think that he has a well-rounded arsenal. We've seen it in the body kicks in the Zawada fight. We've seen his striking in the Alessio dos Santos fight. I think that he's a great test for Ponzinibbio in his return back to the octagon, but I don't think that this will be too hard of a test for Ponzinibbio.
Yeah, man, I think this is a good test for Ponzinibbio as well for his return. And, Ponzinibbio was one fight away there from getting a title fight. This guy beat Nordine Taleb, Gunnar Nelson, Mike Perry when he was Mike Perry, and then, the demolishment of Neil Magny. This guy was one shot from taking on Tyron Woodley and then got this terrible blood infection and talks about losing all kinds of weight and stuff, man. And, he's back, hopefully into the form that, that he left in, man. He fights out of American Top Team. He's riding a 7-fight win streak. This guy's got an unreal jab and a great right hand behind it. And, between Gunnar Nelson and Neil Magny, I like to make fun of it and say he's good at eye pokes. But, the jab really messed both of them up bad, He has great pressure. You really don't see Ponzinibbio with his back against the cage. You usually see him in the middle of the octagon. And, one thing as the return is I question is the gas tank. Is he going to have their adrenaline dump in round one? How is that cardio going to be? And it's lucky that he's getting a guy who's not going to, demolish him with cardio, who's not going to make him drown come round 3 or anything. Right. Lee the Leech definitely is known for, kind of slowing down as the fight goes on. He is great in the first round, don't get me wrong. I think his way to win here is to come out and just, is to go after Ponzinibbio. Don't let Ponzinibbio get any time to fill out this fight to get his feet wet back in the octagon. He needs to go after him and go after him quick. And he's got decent wrestling himself, but, outside of China, Lee the Leech doesn't really fight good. I don't know if it's the long plane ride that he's on for hours or something coming from China to the United States or something, but outside of China, this guy really doesn't perform that well. You talked about the Jake Matthews fight, primarily a wrestler, put him down a couple times on the feet. So, do I think at plus 250 he's getting disrespected? A guy coming off on such a massive layoff with obvious injuries and infections, yes. But still, I don't know if I want to play him because I do, without a doubt, think Ponzinibbio is the better fighter of the two.
Like we said, if the Ponzinibbio that we know with the skill set that we know he had before he left comes out, I think it'll be an easy night for him.
Absolutely, man. Moving on to our co-main event of the evening, man. Special fight for me, man. We got Carlos Condit, who's 31-13, and Matt Brown, who's 22-17. And, man, as you guys know, Carlos is the guy who got me into the UFC, man. He is one of my absolute favorite UFC fighters of all time. This is the third time him and Matt Brown have been scheduled. We've seen Matt Brown have to pull out twice for injuries. But now, man, both just absolute veterans of the sport in a tough, I guess you could say, a tough spot in their career. I think this is the best time for the fight to happen, if you want my true, honest opinion. Carlos just snapped his 4 or 5 fight losing streak there with his win over Court McGee recently in a fight that he looked really good in my opinion. Carlos has great footwork on the feet, trains out of a great gym that he's been with for a long time, the same coaches. And that's where I think he's going to shine, man, is on the feet and the technicality on this fight. And he's got a hell of a chin, man. So, Carlos has never been finished, so I don't know why people think Matt Brown are going to come out here and just steamroll him.
Right.
He's got sneaky head kicks, man, and yeah, you knock him because he's been taken down more than anybody in UFC history, but Matt Brown is number 10 on that list. He has been taken down himself. He has been submitted plenty of times himself, so it's I don't really get where all these people are saying Matt Brown is just going to dominate Carlos Condit. Yes, Carlos, his confidence is kind of easily broken, but, man, you can kind of say the same for Matt Brown, man. This guy, once known as the Immortal, has been finished in 3 or 4 of his last couple fights and stuff. I think his last 4 losses are all by finish or something like that. His chin is really starting to let him down. And his best 2 wins since 2016 are Diego Sanchez and Ben Saunders, man. It's like, those are not good wins where Carlos is over here fighting Oliveira and Neil Magny and Damian Maia and stuff. It's a different level of competition, man. And Matt Brown being 39 with the ACL, man, the fight miles, in my opinion, have caught up to Matt Brown much more than they have to Carlos Condit. Matt kind of has his head over the center a little bit. He's there to be hit. His legs are there to be tore up. And I think Carlos, especially if he gets the kicking game going, man, I like him to wear out the body with him. Matt's been finished with body shots before. I think the leg's going to cause him a huge trouble. Man, after watching the interview on Twitter today, Carlos is going to fucking finish Matt Brown, man.
Yeah, so I've been over this Carlos Condit inside the distance all week. It's sitting at anywhere from plus 170 to plus 200, and I think that it is a legit spot. If you're going to play Carlos Condit, I would suggest playing the inside the distance prop. This opened as a pick'em, and a sense, Condit has been the guy who's been receiving the money. I think rightfully so, and I think that we can directly look at his Court McGee fight in his last bout. A lot of people were harping on why Court didn't go for the takedown, and I think it's a testament to what Carlos Condit was doing to prevent that takedown. Anytime that Court would even think about shooting the takedown, Carlos Condit always had something in his face, was always using his movement to get out of the range for even a decent shot attempt by McGee. If I'm being realistic, I don't think either one of these guys have many other opponents in the 170-pound division that they could actually beat. I think that this is a perfect matchup for both of these guys in the stage of both their careers right now. Matt Brown, we talked about it, downhill. He's 3-6 in his last 9, and like you said, the 2 guys that he has wins over, it's tough to even congratulate him on those. Realistically, I don't know. One of them isn't in the UFC anymore, and Ben Saunders, and Diego Sanchez is one fight away from his way out the door. Totally. Matt Brown, I don't know if you've ever, if you've played sports, you've always had that one guy on your team who might not be the most athletic or talented player, but makes up for it with hustle and grit and, just tries harder than everybody. And I think that that's the type of fighter and the type of skill set that Matt Brown has been relying on his entire career. And, now we're looking at a 40-year-old who has, damn near a 500 record. And that hustle, that grit, that, grueling style that he's relied on, it's tough to fall back on that 40 years old. Yeah. Shoot, you'd hope that you'd have a more technical aspect of your game like Carlos Condit does. And even in his aging body, we still see him in that Court McGee fight to find those weird angles, still use his awkward timing to kind of set up his shots. And for me, I think that this is a pretty easy pick for me. Carlos Condit all the way. I don't think Matt Brown is technically skilled enough to get this fight to the ground. I think Carlos Condit will pick him apart. And with that type of hype interview, like he said, he's going to fuck up Matt Brown on Saturday, and I couldn't be more excited. Yeah, man. In the night in our main event, we've got Max Blessed Holloway at 21-6 versus Calvin Kattar at 22-4. I think that this is an excellent matchup stylistically. You've got, I guess, the best pure boxer in the featherweight division on Calvin Kattar's side, and maybe the best pure striker on the side of Max Holloway. Both of these guys, even their styles, they almost imitate each other. They have a squared shoulder when they fight. Max has more of an open stance where he almost invites the punches in, right. Where Kattar... although his shoulders are squared, he has a tighter guard. And, you would think after explaining those two different styles that Max Holloway would get hit more, but it's actually Calvin Kattar that has the negative strike differential. And I don't think that it's something that he's going to be fixing. I mean, this is a guy who, at 32 years old, he's been a pro in MMA since 2007. And you would think that if he was going to make adjustments to getting hit less, this would be the time to do it. But we just haven't seen that. He gets into some dog fights, and that might be one of his biggest knocks. He's looked good in his recent fights in Jeremy Stevens and Dan Ige, but neither one of those guys would hold a torch to Max Holloway, in my opinion.
Neither one of those are getting a title shot.
No, and I think Max Holloway walks through him easier than Kattar did. I think that he's the type of guy that would finish Ige. And it's hard to knock Kattar on his
finish of Stevens.
Yeah, that was pretty dang good. So I guess like the biggest fight that I have to like take from in Calvin Kattar's career is his Shane Burgos fight. That was another guy who was Max Holloway's size that Kattar was able to establish the jab early. He put on a clinic against Shane Burgos. First through the beginning of the third round, he really didn't have any parts of that where I was worried for Calvin Kattar. And then in his fight against Renato Moicano, it's one of his losses, and that's where we saw Kattar's susceptibility to leg kicks. He is heavy on that lead leg, and that's something that you find with boxing heavy attacks. So that's something that I think Max Holloway could exploit. He has an inside leg kick that I've seen him use, although he doesn't use it often. That is something that I think that he'll implement in this matchup, strictly because we've seen Calvin Kattar fall to it in his previous matchups.
Yeah, man, I love Max here in this spot. It is like we compared it to the final fight of last year with Wonder Boy and Jeff Neal. You've got the best striker of the featherweight division with the guy who is primarily only his weapon is his striking.
Right.
And we showed everybody up with that Wonder Boy pick, man. It's like everybody was all over Neal there, and it's like, do you really expect that striker to come out and outstrike the best striker in the division? And it's not going to happen, man. We've seen it over and over again. We could do this all day when we talk about Mackenzie Dern's ground game versus Jandiroba. If you have somebody who is the best in their division at their discipline, and then another person that uses the same or very similar discipline, how are you going to go against the They do not negate each other.
Right. It's betting principles of MMA. If there's somebody who has similar stylistic matchups, but one of them is proven to be the GOAT of their division in that discipline, you have got to go with them every time. And at minus 150, man.
Absolutely, man. I know that is why we're all over Max. This guy at 29 years old has accolade after accolade, title defense, man. And I refuse to think that his best days are behind him. He is 5-0, man, in like featherweight main events. This guy has not lost a non-title bout since Conor McGregor in 2013. And man, when you look up and down the list, Conor McGregor and like Dustin Poirier are the only guys that have even beaten this guy in the UFC. Max is legit, man. He's never been knocked down. He holds all kind of records. You see him take Khabib fights on days' notice. Like, there's nothing more that you could want in a fighter, in my opinion. And Max Holloway, when this guy smells blood, he will put you up against the fence and start ripping that body. His striking IQ is it's beyond measures, man. But like you said, him and Kattar, they resemble each other a whole bunch. They both can actually get that front leg torn up. They both kind of get jabbed up a little bit with the boxing heavy approach there. But man, I know everybody's kind of on Kattar this week, but I'm not, man. I like Max Holloway to get this done, and it's hard to say for him to get another shot at Volk. It's hard to do that fight so soon for a third one. I know he took his foot off the gas, much like Reyes did to Jones there, 247, but you got to take it from the champ, and I hate to say that about my boy, man, but I wish he wouldn't have left it so close to the judges because he was dominating rounds 1 and 2, but I think he learned his lesson, and I think Max doesn't take his foot off the gas at all on Saturday.
Yeah, man. There's nothing about, I think I'm reiterating myself, but there's nothing about Kattar's performances that I don't think that Max couldn't do or do better. Yeah. And so to have someone like Max who opened at a minus 190, we've seen him open at a minus 140 to a minus 210. It's all over the place for this fight. But from what we can tell, the line shifted in Kattar's favor dramatically since the opening line. And just to get who we both consider the featherweight GOAT at minus 150, it's impossible to pass up, and something that I'm actually really looking forward to playing on the podcast and then looking back on it later on in the year and just thinking, man, how could we have passed that up?
Absolutely, man. That concludes our first trip back to Fight Island, man. We've got 11 killer fights, and as always, man, for me, that fight to watch out of those 11, man, that's gonna be Punahele, Soriano, and the Dusko, Todorovic. I refuse to, like I said, to put any kind of money on that fight. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy that. And as far as fighter to watch for me, I'm going to lean with Max Holloway. You know, hardly rarely do you going to see Max Holloway lose in 3 of his last 4 fights. And one that I think he kind of costed himself. And the last one, I think we see a nice Max Holloway on Saturday.
Nice. So I'm going to go with my fight of the night to be Joaquin Buckley against Alessio Di Chirico. I think that this is the UFC is setting up Buckley for something big. Like I said, it might not be the best opponent for him to get that big knockout in, but you know, it's a guy on an L3 in the UFC, so this is one of his best chances. Yeah. I could really see some fireworks in that fight. And then my fighter to watch, it's got to be Ponzinibbio. With that 2.5-year layoff, he's coming in with a lot of unknowns, and at 34 years old, I'm really curious to see if he can if he's stayed sharp over these last 2.5 years, even though he's been dealing with injuries.
Absolutely, man. I am so glad fights are back. And in just a couple days, we will have another podcast for the Wednesday night fights with Kiesa and Magny. We haven't decided quite the number yet, but that's actually one of 2 posters that we have. So once we hit a certain number, somebody else will be getting that signed poster back there. So I'm glad the UFC fights are back. I'm glad we're able to make some money off these fights again. And I hope you guys are cashing with us and have a blessed week.
Yes, sir.